Yes, my name is Sergio de Sousa, the Head of Data and Digital Transformation for First National Bank of Namibia. Currently part of my portfolio, I look after robotic process automation, data analytics, innovation, as well as process engineering. I've got more than 12 years experience in driving and leading transformational initiatives and reforms within the financial sector at a corporate level, institutional level, national level, and even regional level. So yeah, it's my pleasure to speak to you today and give you some of my experience and insights that I've gathered over the years that I believe have helped me to achieve the successes in driving digital transformation at the various levels that I've mentioned. So with that, one thing that I've realized is, when I was preparing for this presentation, is that we know that there is no digital transformation without people transformation. And part of that, I started a little survey on LinkedIn yesterday, just kind of to validate my own experience. And I asked the question, I made a statement. So just for clarification, I will use the term disruption and transformation interchangeably throughout the talk. And the statement was simply this: digital transformation is 80% about people and 20% about technology. And in understanding that, if we agree that there's a huge people and cultural and change management aspect in disruption, then one thing that's very important to realize is that the point of view we take, or our perspective, can be very critical to the success of driving that agenda. And with that, I'd like to open up just with a quick video to illustrate that point. So why I like that video, it was a physical light installation that was done. And before it starts and at the end, it looks like just a jumbled mess of lights. But depending on your positioning and your perspective, you'll see the word light or you'll see the word dark. And I think in driving transformation, driving disruption, you need to understand that there are these typical mindsets and perceptions that you'll have to overcome and figure out how to accommodate to help make success of your disruption or transformation journey. So my experience in my own career is that there's typically three mindsets when you start with transformation. You've got the opportunity, like the light mindset. People see the opportunities that are out there. They see the end goal. They see what is possible. They see how we can innovate faster, how we can bring our products and services to market faster, how we can improve customer experience, how we can gain market share. They see the possibilities, they see the vision and the end state. And often these are the people that are part of these specific transformation teams, or the visionary chief, the chief information officer, or the CEOs of the company. And that's already where you have a lot of buy-in. But in my experience, when you're starting a major transformation, these people are unfortunately in the minority. Then you've got those that will be of the challenge mindset. And typically these are the people that are maintaining the legacy business model, maintaining the legacy systems. And they feel they have their hands so full just keeping things afloat, looking after what's already there. They feel the rate of change is just too fast. There's so much coming at us. Luisa mentioned this in the beginning, how to make sense of it, how to transform and keep the business going at the same time. And they don't quite understand the end goal and the end vision. So it's important that a lot of your transformational disruption agenda has a plan on how to engage these people and change their perspective from this challenge mindset to the opportunity mindset. And then also a critical set of people within your organization will be what I call the Dusk Mindset. And these are the people that are kind of in between the opportunity and the challenge mindset. They haven't made up their minds. They see the pieces. They know that there's these projects and these initiatives, but they can't see the end goal. They can't quite understand how it's going to make their lives better as an employee, quite understand how it's really going to impact the customers. And they probably believe that this transformation or this disruption agenda is actually just going to come and go and be replaced with a new fad. And it's important that these people be managed as well at the beginning of this journey and throughout, that they don't swing to becoming the challenge mindset, but you ideally want them to become part of the opportunity mindset. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Another thing that I've noticed that's very important on driving transformation or disruption in your organization is that if we're talking about people and we're talking about mindsets, the language that we use is so important. And we actually take this for granted, I've realized sometimes. And if you're going to have a proper transformation and a program and want to achieve success in this, be very careful on the terms you use and make sure that there's clarity in your organization on that terminology. And I'll give you some examples. So the title of this talk is How to Disrupt Legacy Business Models for a Successful Digital Future. So if you start unpacking those terms and you just throw it out in the organization, you might see disruption as a positive thing. So obviously in this context, we're saying, yes, it's a positive thing because we want to replace the old with something new and great. But if you think about the term disruption, I'm going to disrupt your day tomorrow. It's not going to fill you with warm, fuzzy feelings. It's going to give you a negative perspective, right? So why are we so quick to push this word disruption? I understand where it comes from, but for the sake of getting people on board, maybe we should rethink the fact that disruption historically has been a negative word. And maybe we should consider other terminologies in driving in our agenda. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. Another one that's interesting for me is when we talk about legacy business models, we talk about it very negatively. And I understand why. We're saying, it's these legacy business models, these legacy systems that are stopping us from innovating. It's stopping us from really transforming. It's stopping us from finding the efficiency that we want. It's stopping us from increasing our market share. But if you think about the term legacy as an individual, if I ask you, what legacy do you want to leave behind in the world one day? Just think about that for a moment. Most of you will be filled with some grand ideas of grandeur and leaving the world a better place than you found it, making a positive impact. So the term legacy in and of itself is not always a bad thing. And in a personal context, it's a good thing. But when we bring it into a business context, it becomes a negative thing. And what we need to understand, legacy business models was good for a point in time, and they help a bit about that later. And then very basically, when we talk about business models, it's simply the idea about how you as an organization is going to create value, going to be able to deliver that value to who it needs to get to, and being able to capture the value back so you can continue with the cycle. Lastly, this term about digital success or digital future success, I find very interesting and can sometimes be very ambiguous, but is very important as part of your transformational journey, your disruption journey and agenda, to define very clearly for your organizations. Because if you ask 10 people on this call what are their views around it, you'll probably get 8 to 9 different answers in terms of how do you define digital success for your company. Is it simply going from manual processes to automated, from paper to digital? Is it about simply taking your products and services online, creating an app? What defines your digital success? And this is very important, that as a company, staying true to your vision and purpose, we'll talk about that you define this up front. Many companies in the 2000s saw there was this major drive and thrust towards going e-commerce, making sure that your products and services are online, making sure your customers can engage you online. And a lot of companies went and they created amazing e-commerce solutions and platforms. And you could do so much with them online. And they still went bust. They still went bust. They did not succeed. Their vision of digital success was, okay, I see that my competitors are going online. My competitors have an app. So surely that's what I must do. But it has to take a step further. There's a more sustainable way to drive transformation and disruption. So let me ask you why. Why do you want to disrupt your organization? Why do you want to transform your organization? And typically, there's 2 reasons that any human being or any organization will want to change. The one is that they'll have a mentality of fear and we have to disrupt. We have to transform because we're losing market share. We're worried about our stock price. And these are all valid concerns. But we know that a fear mindset, and this comes back to the challenge mindset, has its limitations. It takes a lot longer to drive innovation, to drive transformation. People will see a lot more challenges than opportunities. So really, as an organization, yes, the mentality could work, but it will not be as successful as the mentality and creating that culture within your organization of we want to change, we want to transform. In the want to, and also can be associated to the opportunity mindset, is we have a lot more opportunities that we can see in this transformational journey. We are a lot more open. We are a lot more agile, and in fact, you'll be able to see the wins and receive some of those windfalls early on in your transformation journey. Some of the successes a lot quicker than the have to and the fear mindset. So again, just as leaders of your organizations and driving your transformation agenda, ask yourself, because whatever your personal perspective is on this, I can guarantee you that's a lot of the perspective that the people around you will have. But the beautiful thing about this is that you can always change your perspective, right? So for me, in demystifying and looking at how to disrupt legacy business models, you obviously want to know, what does the future hold? And there is so much out there, and I could talk to you, and I've done presentations, and you've seen so many presentations on the technology trends. I mean, you can just Google the various big firms, the consulting firms around the world, to see what they're saying about the latest digital trends. But really, to break it down for your company and for yourself is in looking at the future. I've created a simple formula that I use just to demystify and simplify this transformation and this digital future that we're talking about. So when looking at the future as an organization, this is your why. Why do you exist? What is it why do you exist? How do you see yourself contributing to the future? And my view is that the future will belong to those companies that are able to make use of two things. The first is data. No surprise there for most of you, I'm sure. But really looking at the various data points you have as a company. Your vision will be a data point. The data that you have in terms of your products, your services, your customer, the data that you have by just virtue of doing business is massive. If you have a legacy business, you've got a lot of data, right? And how you use that and understand that, as well as getting external data sources, like I said, some of them being, okay, what are the future trends? What is happening in the market? Being able to consolidate that in a way that makes sense, to be able to then inform you of what you should do and what you should change as an organization. And part of my journey is just to be demystifying this data. There's so much around data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep learning. There's so many concepts that can confuse when you're driving this journey, but I'd like to break it down in three concepts. You've got descriptive data, which simply talks about what is happening in your ecosystem. Then you've got the prescriptive, the predictive data, which talks about if you do something, what will the impact be? So in other words, if you as a company would cut your pricing by 10%, how much would you forecast that your sales would increase by? Then you've got prescriptive data that actually tells you what to do and what to change. So as an organization, you need to make sense of these concepts and start unpacking them. But very importantly is that data in and itself gives you no value. But in order to extract value out of data, you need to be maturing your processes that will action on that data. And it's very important. Common mistakes companies I've seen make over the years, they'll invest heavily in data, but not simultaneously in the processes to execute on that data. And that's very important. But at the same time, I've seen companies that have invested heavily in robotics, in automation, in the processes, but it wasn't informed by the data. And then you end up having a waste of resources because you weren't actually automating or doing the right things. So as a company and looking at the future, for me, it's very simple. The future will belong to those companies that can successfully make sense of the data around them and within their ecosystems and combine it properly with the right processes. And there's numerous processes. You've got systems, you've got humans that you can staff, physical people you can assign to those processes. You've got robotics. So you need to understand which process is fit for which purpose, and the data should help you in that. And as I said, the future will belong to those that can successfully combine data with process, and that's where you'll get the value for your business model. You remember I mentioned that a business model is simply how you as an organization will be able to create value in the future. And this is my simple approach in terms of one aspect of my approach and how I believe I'll successfully be able to help transformation agendas within my career is by trying to simplify things. Overcomplicating things, I realize, is not good for changing people's mindsets. And this simply talks about your why, your how, and what you want to do. And very briefly, lastly, what I want to talk about in this before I hand over for some questions is that looking at the approach, once you've made sense of all this technology and stuff out there, and just a comment, you'll recall that in the previous slide, I didn't even talk about technology. I didn't talk about digital, because my view is that once you as an organization understand what you want to do, I believe the technology is out there to support you. But starting with the technology is a pitfall that we've seen has happened over the last decade, as opposed to understanding what you need first as an organization, how you want to achieve that or how you want to deliver that value, and then looking for the technology to support that. Okay. So lastly, as I mentioned, just kind of the approach that's been very successful for me is that, going in, you need to appreciate the legacy. So this might sound a little bit contradictory to you, but understand that the legacy got you to where you are now. The legacy was successful in getting you to this point. And in fact, that legacy is what's helped to make the funds available for your transformation journey. So appreciate the people and the legacy for that moment. And once they see that, you'll see there's a lot more buying that comes in as a result. And it's important to understand what you mean by disruption. And as I mentioned, the terminology and the words you use are so important. So maybe instead of using the word disruption, use the word, whatever your company's name is, company 2.0 or 3.0. It's a lot more prone to get people's buy-in than saying, we are going to disrupt you. We're not doing things the way we're supposed to, and we have to now disrupt this whole model. But saying, guys, we want to move to a company 3.0 where we have a company where the staff are more engaged, where stakeholders are more engaged, where our customers are more engaged. So be careful. And there's a lot. You can use transformation. You can use continuous improvement. Understand what you mean when you say disruption and find better ways to articulate it in a way that will be able to assimilate better buy-in. And then be clear about the need to change. Are you changing just simply because your competitors are changing? Or is it a part of your company culture? As I mentioned, is it that have to? Are you doing it because you have to and there's a fear driving you, fear of missing out, FOMO, we know that terminology well? Or is it something that's just part of our culture that we realize we want to be a culture that embraces change? I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes is by John C. Maxwell, and he says that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And that's where as an organization to say, guys, we know that change is coming, it's there. And yes, it can be overwhelming, but in this process, we want to grow as a company. So really be clear about your motive within yourself and then within the people around you. Part of appreciating this legacy is to understand that if you have a legacy business model, you will know it's virtually impossible to switch off the legacy one day and start with a new business model or system or solution the next day. And there's often a parallel process, because in this process, you do not want to jeopardize the customer base you have and let them go through these big transformational changes. And I've seen organizations that have changed massive systems, all for the right reason, but in the end, frustrated customers and lost customers as a result. You don't want that. So at the same time, those people that are managing your legacy business models, you need to make sure that they're able to maintain and keep the customers happy while transitioning them to this new way of delivering your new business model. One thing that I realized, if you think about the challenge mindset that I referred to, or running a legacy business model is not easy. You are trying to fix things, you're trying to keep customers happy, you're maintaining the status quo, and at the same time, you're being put under pressure to change your things. And a lot of business areas or business leaders in those areas that are looking after those legacy systems find it difficult to stop what they're doing, stop looking after the existing customer base, maintaining the systems, the legacy systems, and to transform. And that's where you've seen the emergence of these transformational teams and people that help to drive the transformation agenda. But it's very important that this team not be seen as, sorry for lack of a better example, as another audit function, to go to the legacy business areas to say, okay, you should be doing this. Why aren't you doing this better? Why haven't you changed it? But rather that the transformation team really be seen as a partner to the business areas that need to transform. To say, yes, we want you to maintain your customer base, look after them. We will partner with you to help you transform and focus on the transformational agenda. So that's been very critical in my experience and my journey. and then to showcase early wins. I remember very early in our robotics journey a couple of years ago when we were trying to get by and there was a lot of uncertainty. We went to one of our legacy business areas, and where there was some interest, and there was this process where one of our insurance companies gave us a file with a couple of hundred customers where we had to manually go and deduct the insurance premiums off our system and transfer it to them. Yes, it's a very outdated system, but it's what we were doing. And as part of our journey, we said, okay, it took this one person between their other workload about 3 weeks to actually process this file. And you can imagine they didn't enjoy doing this. So we went in and said, okay, let's help you do this. Yes, it's going to be a bit of extra work. So we worked with them early on. In about 2.5 months, we were able to take that process that took them about 3 weeks between their other tasks and responsibilities, and we were able to break it down with a click of a button, and it was done in 30 minutes. We then took that person and made them our champion for driving our robotics transformation agenda. So instead of the transformation team doing it, we had the face of a previously seen legacy business area now advocating for what this change is and how it's actually helping. And it helped us to just speed up action. So with that, I'm going to ask you again. So if I say to you disruption or digital transformation is 80% about technology and 20% about people, the question I'll leave you with is, if you believe that's true, how much of your resources and your time is actually being spent on the people component?
Guys, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to add them into the chat box on your right. I do have a question, and I know this is almost the impossible one, but if in the audience we have a legacy bank or a bank that has legacy systems who's looking to embark on a change or transformation process like you've described, they always say it's like building a house. It's always going to take longer than you anticipate, cost more, and add more gray hairs along the way. What is the best way to start, and how much time should we be factoring in for a transformation process like this?
Yeah, I think you're right when you say it's an impossible question, and I'll just answer from my experience in my career how it's been done. I think it's important to, in a journey, it can take 3 years, 5 years to actually realize the transformation or the disruption agenda that you have. But it's very important to, and there's many ways you could do it. One of the ways we looked at was, okay, which business area is actually contributing the majority of the profits to the organization? That could be one thing. The other option is to look at business areas that are a concern for the organization. So you could take it from two perspectives, but in that perspective is then to say, okay, what are the biggest pain points in that business area? And it helps to also get the buy-in to say we're trying to understand what really keeps you up at night, and then to see how we can provide a solution as part of our digital transformation journey to that particular problem. And I mentioned just one example. So I think it's a factor of maintaining a long-term vision and a bigger picture, but understanding that you need those wins. You need to prove value. I mean, I forgot to mention this in my talk, is that, as part of identifying those early wins, a phrase I heard, everybody knows the idea of proof of concept, right? And early on I said, get away from the idea. There's no such thing as a proof of concept. Use proof of value. Because then at the end of the day, what you're saying is, yes, it's a new concept, but we're proving that it's going to give value to the organization. And you've got to show that value. And ideally, you want to have a scenario where the early wins you're showing start funding the next part of the transformational agenda. So very importantly, it is hard to have a transformational mindset and a financial mindset, but ultimately you want to give value. So whoever's driving the transformational agenda within your organization has to find those early wins. I mean, AI and all these concepts, blockchain, they're massive and they're big and they require a lot of investment. So you need to have that. But find the smaller things. I mean, just going from paper application forms to digitizing application forms, it doesn't seem like a massive disruption, but it's all things that build up as part of your transformational journey. So for me, it's very important as organizations do that. The big stuff, you have those visionary people, but you have to break it down into a workable plan. Look at the small wins, the quick wins. I'm not quite a fan of that term, but low-hanging fruit. Look for that while you're looking and working on those big R&D initiatives at the same time. And then obviously those smaller wins will help you to get more credibility in the program, get more buy-in. And it's a journey, and you have to be open to learning. I mean, sure, there's a lot of it doesn't come without making mistakes along the way, but you learn from them. You need to have a culture that, with the best knowledge that you have, you're making the best decision. But at the end of the day, you must realize that you know what they say, fail fast, innovate quickly, but we fail fast and do the iteration. And it's difficult in legacy organizations. I admit it's difficult, but that's why I think this concept of having a separate team that partners with the business is quite important. And I know it's difficult in the climate that we have to think of having a specific team, and it doesn't have to be big. And in fact, at the end of the day, you shouldn't have that team after a few years. So I should actually not have a job in the next 2-3 years if I'm really successful, because transformation should be part of the language and the culture of the organization. So yeah, I hope I've touched on things. It's not an easy thing, but it's something that
it's tough. Sergio, one last question from me is the theory around disruptive innovation is don't try and do it inside, is go out and form a separate entity whose focus is pure and who has the end goal in mind, and actually build your own disruption, create the next S-curve. What is your feeling about partnering, either partnering with, existing fintechs, or actually building a unit that is untouched by the specific constraints of a big organization like a bank?
I think it should be considered by all organizations. I think the mentality of we want to build and create everything ourselves might have worked in the past. But I think a lot of companies that realize that that's not always practical and always feasible. So it will depend on your company culture in terms of how quickly and how autonomous that unit or that section can be versus having totally separate from your organization. So I totally believe there's a place for partnerships between legacy banks and fintechs. And I think to not consider it, I think would be a disservice to running your transformation agenda. And sometimes, I always tell people, when you look at business cases and things, sometimes it's not about just proving why you should do it. It's sometimes proving why you shouldn't do it. And showing, guys, maybe we shouldn't create a team in the company. This is X, Y, and Z. This is the numbers we've run. We should rather partner with the fintech. And I think that's got to be part of the learnings that's there. But I think you have to consider it, obviously, the right partnerships. But I also think it must be something that's well thought out, because I think a lot of legacy institutions are on a place where they're driven a lot by FOMO. And I think that can cause you to make some very costly mistakes. So I think be careful who you partner with. But I think what I like is that, and again, this is my perception out there, is that there's a lot of fintechs willing to partner, but not a lot of legacy banks. But I've seen that changing a lot, especially in the last 3 years, which is very exciting for me. And you need to be open and question. And again, it's a thing of saying, guys, we wanted to keep this ecosystem to ourselves, but does it still make business sense? And can we not have a smart partnership, change our business model, disrupt it a bit? And we would never have partnered. Now we're partnering. And find ways to get efficiencies and value out of that. So I think as an organization, you really have to look at it for yourself and answer that question on whether to use a fintech or not. Do it for the right reasons, but you have to consider it as part of your transformation journey.
Wonderful. Sergio, thank you so much for a fascinating presentation. I think it really helped to create context. We've really enjoyed having you. Thank you.